I want to welcome everybody here to our event this evening, Navigating as a Female Entrepreneur, which is a topic we haven't taken on before. And I have a great panel that's going to tell you what it's like from the trenches. So let me, first introduce myself. I'm Stephanie Marrus. I run the Entrepreneurship program here at UCSF. I probably know many of you from a past class. We've been doing a global class for the past 2020, past 4 years, well, I guess 3 years now. So we just graduated cohort 5, and very pleased to see Katherine from Australia joining us, who is in the global class. Ivana Vasic, who's one of our panelists, was also in the global class, cohort 3, Ivana?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. So we've got representation, and Katherine Grill, who is also on our panel, was in the prior class pre-COVID days called Startup 101. So we think it's 2019, Katherine, did I get that right?
It would have been 2020 because we had to shut down halfway and go virtual.
Oh, okay. Gee, huh. Okay, I'm not sure. So you were not global class though, right? I think you were before that.
I was Startup 101, like right
Yeah.
in during the shutdown. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. And there's Janine, who escaped all my classes. Okay. I'm glad to have found her recently. So let me do quick intros of the panel, and then I'll ask them to add to that. The protocol tonight is cameras on, so please turn your camera on. It's much better for our speakers to see real people, so please do that. And we will take questions in the chat, and we will stop the speakers from time to time with questions, so you don't have to wait till the end. We definitely want to hear your questions. And this is the first time that I've done this topic, so I'm really interested to see how it's useful to those of you. I'm looking at a lot of women on my screen and occasional men to see how useful this is. So, just to quickly introduce the panel, Janine Sengstack, you want to wave in case someone's not focused on you? Okay. Janine is a cell biologist. She got her PhD from UCSF. Her PI, Hao Lee, is a co-founder.
Not quite, but pretty soon here.
Peter, you need to be, I don't know, you're on mute, but we're hearing you somehow. Anyway, so he co-founded it with her. Her company is called Junevity. It's an aging company, rejuvenation factors. We all hope she'd hurry up and get something to market. She worked at Genentech as a microbiologist. She was part of the Nucleate Scientific Excellence. Well, she won a Nucleate Scientific Excellence Award. She was part of Nucleate, which is a group that's trying to encourage founders. And she has investors that you may not know of, but she's been very successful in raising money. So she's a new CEO 2022, I believe, and I'll let her add to that in a couple of minutes. Our second panelist is Ivana Vasic. Ivana is a UCSF, UCB bioengineering PhD. She postdoced at Gladstone across the street. She did stem cell research and still does. She has a cell engineering platform that is going to revolutionize IVF, hopefully. And she was featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 in 2024. Is that right? You were just in that, as I recall.
Yes.
Very cool. I actually was a judge, but I didn't see your name, so glad you got in. And She has been working with a Nobelist, Shinya Yamanaka. So very impressive that he has stayed close to her company. Her investors are, I think, largely led by women. I'll let her address that later. So welcome, Ivana. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
And then Katherine Grill, who comes from a different side. She's not doing a therapeutic. She's not a UCSF PhD. She is a PhD from American University. She's a behavioral neuroscientist and therapist. She also was in Forbes 30 Under 30 and has a lot of other awards to her name. She did Startup 101. I'm actually going to ask you to start with your data in a few minutes, Katherine, that you put out in LinkedIn, because it was really interesting. Her company, Neolth, is a digital health company focused on mental health, an app for college students. And she's been building this for over 5 years, I guess 6 years now, just about. So she has been through several accelerators, Techstars, Startup Health, and the NASDAQ Center for Entrepreneurship. Some of those I guess there's accelerators of a sort. So she has a very different experience base and a number of years more at this than Janine and Ivana. So I thought her perspective would be very valuable as well. So that's the lineup here. And anyone want to add to my introduction? Ivana, Janine, Katherine, something you'd like to add to help people understand who you are? Ivana.
I think you did it pretty, very good justice. Yes, I'm a first-time founder, very academic founder, as Stephanie mentioned. We spun out the company from the Gladstone Institutes, and this is the first year that the company's been operational. So I definitely think having Katherine here to speak on her continued experiences in this space is very valuable.
Great, thank you. Katherine, anything you want to add?
Katherine, I'm calling in from LA tonight. Yes, Stephanie mentioned my background. I did come from academia. I was teaching and doing some NIH research in mental health, and then got into the digital side. We do a lot of work with teens and young adults, and I just saw that as a great way to meet young people where they are. And I've also been thinking a lot recently about the intersection of mental health and then being a founder and being a woman entrepreneur. So I think there's some cool topics that we can discuss tonight.
Great. And Janine?
Thank you for the great intro. So I spun out. So my PhD work was the basis of what my company, Junevity, is based upon. And that is that we think transcription factors are super cool. And I will refrain from nerding out too hard. But basically, we found new genes where if we target them, we can make cells act younger and act healthier. And so I'm thrilled to be moving that science forward and continuing on to move towards therapeutic development.
Great, thank you. Okay, one rule for the chat is no science questions. Okay, it's way too easy for us to all go there. So I will ignore those questions if you put them in. This is about life as a woman entrepreneur. So, we're going to talk about the ways that people are dealing with being different in this arena. But Katherine just put out some really interesting data. I'm going to ask her to start. So just to frame where we're at, Katherine, you're okay with showing that LinkedIn data that I just saw?
Yeah, sure.
Talking about it. Yeah, just.
Yeah, no problem. Of course, as a scientist, I wanted to look up some of the stats before we had this call because I was seeing different reports and some of them were mentioning things are great for women. And it wasn't what I was hearing, narratively from a lot of my founders. So I did look up a couple of reports. One was from Carta, if you're familiar with them. Another one was from a group called Women Who Tech, who do a lot of work on women in entrepreneurship. And there are a couple of different stats. Women-only teams, so the founders are only women, raised 2.8% of all venture funding. So pretty pretty low. It's actually decreasing, the lowest amount in 4 years. So something I think we've seen this year with the market shift is women are getting less funding. Only 13% of companies incorporated this past year had a female founder. So that's also decreasing. Some more alarming statistics for me was that about 40% of women founders and also about 40% of just women employees in tech reported that they had been harassed.
Katherine, could you make your microphone louder? We got a request. Someone can't hear you very well.
Yes, maybe I can after I.
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, still a lot of harassment going on. And 35% of harassment is coming from senior leadership. So it's really coming from the top of the companies, and it's kind of still pretty prominent. So there are a couple different reports. Happy to put the links in the chat, Stephanie, but I think it's good to kind of know what's going on in this space and how trends are shifting over time.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, thanks. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that or any more time on that. That's simply just to sort of level set the environment that women entrepreneurs are existing in and trying to succeed in. Yeah, so I wanted to, and again, we'll take some questions in the chat. So we're going to start out by talking about what are the issues with being an entrepreneur. And let me throw one out. How about, we all know how important mentors are for startups, or really for anything in life. You know, what's it like to try to get a mentor engaged with one of you? And whoever wants to kick that off. You know, do you have mentors? Was it hard to get them? Where did you find them? Are they men? Are they women? What about them? Okay, Janine.
I'll give it a start. So I feel incredibly fortunate that I have a really supportive ecosystem of mentors. But I should say it did not just happen. I worked very actively to make that ecosystem surround me. So how do I do that? Well, I have a combination of female and male and everyone in between sort of mentors, where my professor was a male and he's my co-founder. And then also my two other co-founders of my company are also men. And they're just like the most supportive, awesome people ever. But along the process, I interviewed other people and I figured out who I like and who I don't like. And I came across plenty of egotistical people I would not want to interact with. And so part of the process is talking to very large numbers of people to really find the right ones that you want to be with, that you vibe with, that you really get along with. So as an example of that, Rob and I, my co-founder Rob, we spent weeks and weeks walking many miles of San Francisco, discussing life and philosophy and how do we want to approach the company and how do we want to do these different things to really make sure that we're on the same page and that we really would approach running the company in a similar way. And so with that, it set the groundwork to be solid. And so then I just basically interview lots of different people to find the right network. And I recommend, do not be afraid to reach out to people that you think, oh, maybe they would be a cool mentor. Because I did that all the time. I would just cold email people on LinkedIn or message them and say, hey, I'm thinking about going into this space, or I think what your work is super cool. Would you be up for a 15, 30-minute call where I could learn from you? And that has opened up many doors into awesome mentorship opportunities.
Oh, that's a great idea. I wouldn't have thought of just going on to plain old LinkedIn and not someone that you really knew. Cool. Okay. Katherine, what's your perspective on, have you found a lack of mentors in this space for you?
No, my journey was really going through different incubator and accelerator programs. So I did a few. You're Stephanie. I did Techstars. I did one at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, which is based in San Francisco. And I kind of did them back to back. One of my mentors at the time, who I think I got from one of the accelerators, kind of recommended that. She had done a couple accelerators and I found it really helpful. And part of the work going through those programs is that they actually do match you with mentors. So you get to work with people during the, whatever it is, 8, 15 weeks that the program is. For me, that was great because you get to see, you know, if they're a good fit, if they want to continue on with the company. I have some people from the Startup 101 course that I was working with 4 years ago who are like now officially on the board of my company. So we just had a great fit. So in that respect, because I was able to go through some of these accelerator programs and get matched with the best kind of talent and mentors, it was a really great opportunity for me to meet people, and I would definitely recommend it for other founders.
Well, maybe you should explain what an accelerator program is.
Oh, sure. So there are basically business programs for when you're starting up a company that can help with some business fundamentals and support. And these programs, sometimes they're called accelerators or sometimes they're incubators if you're at just a very early idea stage. I think they can be great, especially for first-time founders. Oftentimes, different programs will offer different things. So Stephanie, let me know if I'm wrong. But when I went through Startup 101, it was really for folks like me who were scientists who wanted to bring some sort of kind of something they were working on in the sciences into the business world and learning about kind of commercialization and market research and really basics like that. When I went through a program like Techstars, that was something where you learned a lot around pitching. We worked with acting coaches. You learned about venture funding and how does that work. So different programs might have different goals or milestones that you'll accomplish throughout. But if you're a first-time founder and there's an area where you feel like I might want to learn more about this, it's almost like a structured course that you can go through that can be really supportive. And then you get this group of business advisors and mentors to work with, and you also get a cohort of other peer founders to get support from.
Great, thanks. Okay, Ivana.
So I think probably one of my biggest mistakes, and continues to be one of my biggest mistakes, is not having prioritized finding the right mentors from the get-go. Now it's a little bit more forefront of my mind. But when I was starting out, I don't know, I've done things a specific way in academia. I've been pretty, I think, independent for doing research. And so, and 100% of my time and effort was focused there on, and especially when we started the company, was only based on kind of hiring scientists, developing the research strategy, making sure that everything we were doing is really rigorous, which of course is one of the most important aspects to starting a company. But I am quickly finding out how important your network is in doing everything related to running your company. So in raising money, in finding people to be on your board or your scientific advisory board, in so many things, in connecting you to the right people, in establishing clinical partnerships, in establishing research partnerships. And I think coming out of academia, perhaps that was known. Maybe I was kind of like a pandemic baby, PhD baby, where we didn't really go to conferences. And the conferences we did go to were kind of on Zoom. And I was in so many of these virtual poster sessions. But that was the biggest learning moment, was realizing how absolutely critical it is to go to networking events and establish mentors that can help you early on. So that's something I'm actively working on now.
Never too late, right?
Never too late.
Yeah. Well, let's pick up on something you just talked about, networking and networks. Sometimes women have said there just aren't that many professional networks that they can access. Have any of you on the panel found that, or have you found good professional networks that you'd recommend for other women? Who wants to kick that off?
I'm happy to talk about it a little bit more. So now that I've kind of gone on this, I have this mission to find more mentors, and especially women mentors who kind of have gone through the same things that you've gone through. Are usually these, since I'm in the women's fertility space, most of the founders here are women. I think one way that I've started building this kind of network around me is actually through my investors. If you're able and lucky enough to be able to choose the VCs who invest in your company, I think being very mindful about who invests and kind of what that says about what you're, the tech or the therapy that you're building. I think it's really important. So for example, one of our investors is RH Capital. They're specifically a women's health related fund, and they have a lot of female CEOs as part of their network. So I've kind of been tapping there. There's other funds that are, could be synthetic bio funds. And so I think it depends on kind of really what you're looking for from your network. But I think if you're able to establish connections that way, I think it's very powerful. And then of course, just talking to other female founders, you get ideas for Slack channels, networking events that are specific to women. And it seems like more and more there's those types of opportunities to participate in.
Great.
I would say for me, I haven't specifically sought out like female networks. It's more, which is totally fine to go for it. Like you do that. For me, it's been more like just finding good people regardless of gender or sex. And so that involves the like interviewing process that I was talking about, where you just talk to so many people and try to figure them out. And some of them happen to be female founders. There's this great company called Fauna Bio that was founded by 3 women, and they are just kicking butt and are an awesome example. So I look to them for mentorship as well. But I think it just kind of goes into I found aging oriented companies where I would get advice from those types of founders, or like QB3 through UCSF, for example, has some great mentoring opportunities. So there's a lot of resources nowadays where you can get your foot into the door and get those kind of mentoring connections early on.
Right. So is there any downside to seeking out networks that are just women? Are you missing something, or is that all upside that you now have, a peer group around you? What do you think?
I mean, I'm biased, but I would say a mixture is a good idea because that reflects reality of who you're going to interact with.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Katherine, we haven't heard from you.
Yeah, I think you want to be mindful of what you're seeking out in the network. If you're really looking for peer support, and maybe peer support around something specific to your identity and being a woman, then that makes a lot of sense. I think a couple of us are in the Forbes network. They have a great U30 network, and then they also have kind of subgroups. So one of them is specific for female founders, and that's a great way that I get support. And then there are also other subgroups like, people in health tech or other areas. So finding whatever it is that's that common thread that you want to connect with around other founders is important. And I think one thing as the company starts to go through different life cycles that you really want to be mindful of is when you're starting up your company, figure out who the other CEOs are in the space, not just your competitors, but other companies who are kind of adjacent, because they're going to be going through very similar things to you. So this is, regardless of gender identity, throughout the life cycle of the companies and years later, where it's important to really build up that network, because this is where I think strategic partnerships, M&A, just even getting support from founders as you go through different growth stages of your company, that's something that has worked really well for me. So part of that has come through different accelerators that I've gone through, but part of that has just also been, as I was building the company, seeing who else is a CEO or my adjacent role at another company, and making sure on LinkedIn or some other way I get connected with them so we can build up that relationship as our companies grow.
Yeah, great. Well, it's all about networking and building relationships. Katherine Galvin, you had a question a while ago. Why don't you ask?
Yeah, hi. I'm in a city that I don't think there is anybody else working in the medtech realm that I am in. Is it important to have mentors close by, or can I look further afield, or even international for mentors?
Close by geographically is what you mean.
Close by geographically. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
see any reason why you can't have people in different cities. A lot of my mentors are, again, I was kind of building up my company during COVID, so that changed things. Like even some people, we were living in the same city and we didn't meet for years, which was a little weird. I've had people international, I've had people local, and people in other states. So because of the nature of now we're back to in person and going to conferences, I think you do get to see a lot of these mentors, even if they don't live in the same city. If you're somebody who really likes to have that close relationship and benefits from in-person things, you might want to think about some people who are local, just so you can have that. But for me, it was a really important thing, that a piece of advice that I got early on was thinking about getting diverse mentors. Because oftentimes the area that's most exciting or most comfortable for us, that's where we want to stay. We want to hire all the employees who have a similar background to us. Maybe it's scientists, get a lot of scientists on our advisory board, but you need to really think about where are your gaps. So if your gap is in commercialization or biz dev or engineering or AI, like whatever that is, that's, I would recommend the mentors that you seek out, and try to seek out the experts in that space, regardless of the city that they live in.
Did you want to follow up with that question, Katherine? Your next question.
Just sorry, this Katherine?
Yeah, this Katherine, you just
because I know we're both Katherine G's as well, so that won't even make it easier.
Yeah.
You can call me Kathy, that might help. I would just, that difference between who do we choose to put on or invite to join our advisory board, and who do we invite to be mentors. I'm still uncertain on what I'm looking for in those two spaces.
I can speak to that if that works for you guys. So I have a wide array of mentors, but then far fewer as scientific advisory or just advisory board members. So you can think of the advisory board as like, these are people that when you do your pitch somewhere and you put their name or their photo up, investors are going to go, ah, yeah, that's the expert. They got that covered. And it's like important for you to have an advisor to company in that way, right? But mentors are much looser, but they're also not given equity or paid. For example, mentors are just like nice people that want to help out, basically, in comparison to advisory board members who are paid for their time through equity or through like hourly salary type stuff. And so you can kind of, I would view it as advisory board is like key people that give you greater credibility and are also very useful to you from advice giving, right? For various categories, like Katherine was saying. And then mentors could be like, I see you're at a conference and I talk about, hey, how do you think I should present to this? Or like a more looser thing is how I would think of it.
Ivana, do you have a perspective?
No, I think Janine covered it pretty well. Yeah, in terms of, how to find scientific mentors, and whether it makes, or any kind of mentor really, and whether it makes sense to have them be local. One of my, main mentors is actually my CEO coach. And I can't say enough how much the coaching has helped me develop my skills as a CEO and think through things. It's much more of an intimate relationship that you talk to this person every single week, or more than once a week sometimes, than just, kind of scrounging together information from multiple advisors or mentors. But I love it. I love, it helps me to be in the same city as him, because then we can just go to coffee, or I can call him whenever something arises. And of course, it's not the same as like a true mentor, because I do pay him. But, I have this like very trusting, we've kind of started working together since I started the company. And so there's some history there, some trust has been established, and I really don't know, where I'd be without him. So I think I just have only the best things to say as well for coaching. If you don't know where to start, and then that can turn into them introducing you elsewhere as well. I think all types of executive coaching I've heard from a lot of my founder friends has been very helpful for them as well.
Great. So sort of related to this whole set of topics is role models. men have a lot of CEO role models around because there are a lot of male CEOs. We have fewer. So what's that like? Has that been an issue? Is that is there anyone you do look to as a role model in your field, whatever it might be? And if there's somebody that you think is an important role model, what do you get from that? What is the learning?
I've definitely struggled with this in terms of my identity as a CEO, because when I look at, the most famous founders and CEOs in history, Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, Travis Kalanick, like they all kind of have some of similar personality traits, which is this kind of alpha energy, or at least that's the way they're kind of portrayed. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems to me, there's kind of this dominating aspect of it that I didn't feel that I possessed. And I wondered for a long time whether I was right for my job. But I have had recently more of an epiphany, which is that I really don't think there's a one size fits all to doing this job. And in fact, I think there are many great leaders who have totally different personalities, who have totally different ways of leading. And there are certain aspects like they exhibit humility, they're authentic, they're able to inspire the team, but I don't think there's one way to do this. And so more and more I've begun to ignore that kind of specific phenotype of what it means to be an entrepreneur and a CEO. And I think that since then, I've felt more comfortable to do my job.
Good finding. Yeah. Who else? Role models. Janine.
I would say I am fortunate in that both my co-founders are great role models, and that they were both, as a brief story is that I'm a first-time founder, but one of my co-founders started during his PhD a company that went from 2 people, he got it to 200 people, $250 million raised, and an FDA approval, and now he's joining us. So he's like an amazing role model in terms of running a company and starting it. And then Rob as well has started his own company and got it sold and ran a team of 100 people. And so both of them are amazing previous executives who give me a lot of coaching and mentorship throughout the process. And then something that's actually really important for us was setting culture early. So we have a very extensive culture document for Junevity that we crafted around what do we really want the essence of Junevity to be, or the like core principles that we think are important in how we've been successful in the past, and then how we want the company to function. And that process of coming up with the culture was also a growth period for myself in terms of how do I want to be a leader, how do I want to approach guiding employees, and then learning from them and their previous experiences in their companies.
So you just named 2 male role models. How about female?
Well, I'd say, as an example, my friends at Fauna Bio, where the 3 women co-founders kick butt. They just closed a like $500 million biobuck deal with Eli Lilly for their metabolism related work. Like they're doing really great. So they're great female role models in biotech. But as I said earlier, to me, it's just good people mentors is how I kind of go at it.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Katherine.
Oh, yeah, I was lucky in that I'm in LA now, but when I started up, I was in Silicon Valley. So I always joke like you could throw, I don't know, anything, a stick, and you would hit a founder, because everybody in San Francisco is like a founder of a company. So it was not hard for me, especially going through some of the accelerator programs, to find mentors and to find other female founders who were 20, 30 years older than me and had founded multiple companies. And I was very lucky in that respect. I like, Janine, what you said about thinking around culture and values, because it is very true that you will get all sorts of opinions from all sorts of people. And when I mean a lot of opinions, it's not just your advisors. Like, I can't tell you how many random people on LinkedIn will send me advice, whether it's anything from around like my company to like my headshot and how I do my hair and my makeup. It's very strange, but that's part of, I think, being a woman in this field. So I think a good way of, if you're trying to find role models, if you don't have a lot of people in your kind of city or vicinity, is to first sit and think about what are the values you want. You know, do you want people who have raised a lot of VC? Do you want people who have gone through an exit? Do you want people who communicate in a certain way or have a certain mentorship style? And just make sure that you're not feeling pushed to conform to any one thing, because I do think there are a lot of people who will talk about mentorship instead of building and developing the skills, like Ivana, that you were talking about, that are important to being a CEO. It'll be trying to put you into this box of being more masculine or being more like some of these other people, which may or may not be a fit for you. So I would just say, be really mindful and sit down with yourself and reflect on, what am I looking for out of a mentor and a role model? What sort of values do I have? And then you can decide, I think, who is the best fit for you.
Great. So we're taking questions in the chat. Isabella, I've seen your question, but it's really a general entrepreneurship question. So if we have time at the end, I'll get to it. But please do put questions in the chat. This is meant to be a conversation. So let's talk about fundraising. Now, all three of you have raised funds, and some have raised more than others, but you've kept alive, you've managed to figure this out, how to get access to capital. So what's the deal here? How have you found it? What was the route? How did you find the investors that actually came in? Were they female oriented? Were they just normal investors, not gender indifferent investors? What led you to the access that you got? Katherine, you want to start?
Sure. I have a combination of different investors, a little bit of friends, family, a little bit of angel, a little bit of VC. And we've also done grants and non-dilutive and quite a lot of bootstrapping at my company, which was a strategy for founders to retain ownership and equity in the company. So I think there are different ways you can go about it. That's something that's worked well for us, was to do a little fundraising and a lot of bootstrapping. None of my investors are female founder oriented. Not that they're not thinking about it, but their fund's not specific to female founders. The way that it really started was building relationships. I think everyone I knew for at least a year before they invested. So when I was at the idea stage, was going out, was pitching people, meeting people at different events, sending monthly updates, having different calls with them. So it wasn't like I did a pitch competition and somebody came up to me afterwards and just invested. It was really a long time of bootstrapping and building those relationships. And one of the things that worked for me after, Stephanie, doing your program, was getting into Techstars. So that's an accelerator program, and they do give you some funding, and it has a little bit of a name recognition. So some of the investors that I had been talking to afterwards were like, well, Techstars is going to invest, we're going to invest. And it kind of snowballed from there. So that's how it worked for me. I think it's probably different for other people, but certainly building up your network before you need it and building it up early, I think, is the best way to start to work towards getting funding.
Right. Okay, Ivana.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Most of our investors are actually women, or the ones who are doing diligence on us were women. And I don't know if that's because I'm a woman, or it could simply be because we are a women's fertility company. And, the product we're selling, the therapeutic we're trying to develop, applies most directly to women. But I definitely do feel that there is, or I've noticed there's probably a different cadence of communication and building relationship when it's two women versus if it's two men or a woman and a man, in terms of sometimes like common interests. I would go to networking events and kind of listen to two guys like talk about sports, and that's hard to break into if you know nothing about it. And there is some of that kind of culture that dominates VC and networking events. So it could be that I just kind of people who are kind of more agnostic to that either selected for me or I self-selected for them. And then again, of course, this aspect of being in a women's health field is definitely a bias. As Katherine said, I feel that I had to kind of build up relationships, no matter who it was with, over time, for a while. And there was definitely some crazy experiences on the way to raising of, people saying to you why people won't invest in your company. And I got some interesting feedback sometimes, but you kind of just have to ignore and keep going if it doesn't suit you. I don't think there's, for me, I try not to dwell at all over, people who have negative feedback for you, or, if it's not constructive. I think the best way is to just kind of work on changing what you can feasibly change, and if it makes sense, and if it makes sense for your company and what you're building. So, I like to not dwell on the negative as much as possible.
Great. All right, Janine.
Yeah, so we closed our seed round of $4.5 million the same week I graduated. So that was a good week back in June of last year. And we raised from VCs, so venture capitalists, largely. They were not female founder focused. And so the way we kind of went about it is that we had some that were through my background, which was more of like there was an aging oriented venture capitalist that we were talking to. And then we had some from Rob's, my co-founder's previous company connections. And the one from Rob's side ended up having a better term sheet and a faster turnaround time, right? So then we went with those guys who are just fantastic, and we're thrilled with them, very supportive, really, really like working with them. But as they were saying, it's not an immediate process. No one's just going to give you millions of dollars. Be like, great, I just met you. Here you go, have fun, right? So like, that's not how it works. You need a lot of time and building up and making sure that they, do you trust them? Do they trust you, right? Even if someone offers you a great deal, if their vision or their like drive for what the company should be doesn't align at all with what you want, you probably shouldn't take the deal, right? So there's like a lot of complexities to making decisions about who you want to pitch to, or also who you'd want investment from, to make sure that there's alignment in the vision for the company in the future.
Janine, before I forget, and I probably should have brought this up a while ago, but you talked about this group of women that you ride with.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, would you, as a support network, would you tell people about that? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me. I meant to bring it up earlier. Yeah, so I do horseback riding, and horseback riding is the golf for women, basically, as in like so many biotech conversations happen with female founders and female leaders of biotech at the horse stable. I don't need to golf, I just ride horses. It's great. And yeah, it's fantastic. Like somehow my stable has like CTOs, like top scientists, like other founders of biotech companies, and most people who ride horses are women. So it's like basically all women, and we'll just be cleaning saddles, and I'll be like, hey guys, I'm thinking about getting some investment from over there. And they'll be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Da, 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 da. And they'll like give me some great feedback. It's great. So that falls into the like fun mentor. They're not on my advisory board, right? But they are like great people that I talk to about once a week or so, and just can bounce science ideas off of, or tell them like, oh gosh, I have an employee problem. Do you have advice for that? Something like that. And they're a great support system. So if you have an activity that happens to have lots of female leaders in biotech, I recommend going for it.
Well, the male equivalent is they go work out in the gym in
Yeah, no, they
Silicon
go
Valley
golfing.
and,
Yeah.
right? And
Rob,
the guy
Rob,
they're lifting with is, you know,
yeah. No,
yeah.
Rob golfs and I ride horses, so we got both covered.
Right, there you go, yeah. Anyone else have a special support network to share? Katherine, Ivana? Lucky enough to have what Janine has? Yeah. Oh, well, okay, something to look for in the next life of entrepreneur. Let's talk for a minute about work-life balance. So that's something we hear a lot about from you millennials. You know, you don't want to work crazy hours like the other people above you, and you really want to preserve something of another life. Can you do that as an entrepreneur? Everyone's like, not so sure. Okay.
This is a good question. So a lot of the work that we do is team mental health. So we work with Gen Z, and there's been a lot of questions around, right, Gen Z and their work-life balance. I think it may depend on the person. You know, for me, I do really like working a lot. My partner, married, likes working a lot as well. So for us, that's just what it is. Even on the weekends and stuff, we like to do a little bit, and that's just part of our personality. Because I work with young people, they're impressionable, and I really think about this a lot because they'll come to me and they'll say, "Oh, Dr. Grill, I want to have a company and I want to do a startup and be a CEO." So like, all right, well, why? Why is that? And a lot of it is from what they're seeing on social media. So I try to be really mindful of them to explain what it's really like. I found, and from talking to other people too, I think the experience is you're not working a 9 to 5, you're not working just 40 hours a week. It's your business. You're responsible for it. If something goes wrong on Christmas, if something goes wrong the weekend, the middle of the night, like that's your responsibility. So I think there is a bit of a myth that you're going to have this totally like clean cut. Here's when I work and here's when I do other thing. It really does bleed into one another. One thing that's worked well for me though is to block off times on my calendar of when this is when, you know, I exercise or I go outside, or this is when I'm going to spend, you know, it might just be an hour a day, but with my time with my family. Sometimes things bleed into those times, but if you can be mindful, you can try to block off a couple hours a week for stuff like that. So yeah, that's my take.
For me, I also on my calendar have Janine at stable, which means like they know I should not talk to me because I'm on a horse somewhere. But it's true that you certainly work very hard, or else your company will not make it, right? And it's also your baby. Like you care so deeply about this being successful, so you are like motivated to do a lot of work. Because I'd say on average, we like my co-founders and I probably do around like 60 hours a week or so, where it's like long, but also not insurmountable kind of thing. Where and something that's like helps us as well is that, you know, we understand that it's important to have things outside of just work. So both Rob and John have 2 kids and a wife. So then they like, you know, go to kids' soccer games and stuff like that. Or we try our best to not work lots on the weekends, but I typically do like a couple hours here and there or something like that, but not like a full work day, just because I will not be a good boss or co-worker or anything like that if I'm working constantly all the time. But if it's very like focused, working very hard during the hours I am working, then it's more productive for everybody.
Ivana.
Yeah, I guess it fluctuates, but I think don't expect to have a work-life balance, like, or from my experience. I'm also a solo founder, so maybe that's part of it. You know, maybe it would be nice to like have somebody else to share the burden with. That being said, I think if I could find a way to compartmentalize and not think about work during the off hours, that would be the best. I think that's the biggest kind of mental burden that you don't really think about or no one really prepares you for is, as Janine and Katherine mentioned, you're so deeply invested into something that you've built. And at least for me, I'm worried if things were to go wrong or if I were not to be on top of something. And even if there's nothing to do with that particular moment, I find my mind wandering. So even when I went skiing this weekend, but I was thinking about work. So, and I was kind of like checking email on the side and doing things. So, yeah, I think it's definitely hard to manage. And having some time where, and like structure in place where you take breaks and you rest and you prioritize what this other aspects of your life, I think is really important. And, you know, I have talked to people who have become mothers while they're, you know, while they're still CEOs of their companies. So I think it's possible to do it. But I do think that you need to build a strong infrastructure around you before you do it. So that means, you know, make sure HR is taken care of, make sure you have a really solid accounting department that does, you know, XYZ for you, that you can kind of offload and outsource as much as you can. Make sure that you're hiring scientists who are really good and who can step in and, you know, cover for you in moments where you can't be there or you can't be as involved in the scientific strategy. So I think really it's about building up your team, finding people you trust, and actually doing the work of trusting them, giving them important tasks in the company, and not just being this paranoid hermit where you're doing everything and you're really truly delegating to the people who are trying to help you. So
How about support from friends and family? Is it there?
yes, for me, yes. My husband is, I think, the biggest you know, source of support. And it's kind of strange. I feel like our gender roles in some ways have flipped a little bit. You know, he does most of the cooking now. And I try to repay him as much as I can. But, you know, I think just being cognizant of where your time goes and investing it properly into spending time with the people you love and your family, I think that that's very important. The most important.
I'm also very lucky that I have a super, super supportive husband who also co-founded a company several years ago and like has gone through this process as well. And so he understands a lot of the trials and tribulations or the, you know, many hours of work that go into it, and is endlessly patient when I get home and I tell him every detail of my day. I'm like, I need to tell you everything. And then he listens and smiles and listens and smiles and is always there to support me. So I feel very lucky.
And Catherine's husband is a partner in the company.
Yeah, I have, my husband is my co-founder of the company, so that's a different experience. I think for anybody who's considering doing that, whether you're wanting to be co-founders together or just, you know, start your own venture, it's so key to really set expectations and think about, I mean, it does impact you, right? The time you can spend with your spouse, with your family, the financial stress, especially if you're bootstrapping or maybe you're leaving a more secure job for something more risky. So it impacts and it bleeds into your family life in a very real way that people don't always realize. So that's something I would definitely recommend discussing beforehand, and then also having checks, because the company and your life changes so much. So like every quarter we kind of like to check in, like, how are things going and how is this affecting our personal life, and do we need to make any changes, because I do think that our life and our relationship is very different than a lot of my peers and in their marriages, and that's not a good or bad thing. It's just, you know, that ended up working for us.
Okay, Najid, you've got a good question here. Please ask it. You need to unmute. There you go.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I wrote here, if you think you have faced any difficulties in your journey that kind of stem from being a female, and if so, how have you navigated it?
I can give an example. I felt in raising money, I haven't felt a lot of kind of outright discrimination or anything like that, but it's funny that there's kind of this unspoken rule that you won't be able to raise as much money if you're a woman. So, and that's something that people kind of talk about very openly. So I remember I was talking to this VC. They hadn't invested in my company. We're kind of talking seeing if, that this could be like a good mutual partnership. And at some point, the managing partner said something like, well, we don't know if you'll like remain in the CEO role forever. It's a good time now because, you're the founding scientist and the best, but, eventually we might need to have someone with a little bit more gray hair and, you're very young, you're a woman, you're a first-time founder. So it's kind of like clumped in with all these like, academic, young, female, like those are all apparently like bad things. So I do think that it's kind of very plainly acknowledged that perhaps that could be seen as a negative, especially in subsequent rounds when you're raising quote unquote more serious capital. I don't know how true it is because, I've been able to successfully raise so far. And maybe it's just a matter of being at it for longer and being persistent. But I'll let you know as we kind of get farther along. But it is something that's kind of in a weird way acknowledged, even though they're like, it's not us, but other people are, sexist. So yeah.
Okay, before I take the next perspective on it, just Inder put into the chat a question here we have if any of you would be interested in a female support group for female entrepreneurs. We don't know if we're going to do, we're just exploring. So please go in the chat and fill it out if you're interested. Go ahead. Who was speaking? Katherine, did you want to answer?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on that because it's definitely something that's in the back of your mind, right? You see the statistics and it's funny. They always say that they're like, oh, it's not us, but it's like but people are pretty blunt about it. So I think you see the statistics, right? Women raise less, they have less access to capital. And then, hopefully you find a group of different people like Janine, you were talking about who would be interested. And then you want to kind of reduce that more and figure out, well, who am I interested in? And are they a good strategic partner? But then there's kind of a third layer, I think, as a woman that you need to go through as well, which is reducing it to who's going to be good for me specifically because of my identity as a female. So kind of two areas where this has come up where it's been a bit of a barrier for me, talking to different investors. One I was talking to was a male VC, and it turned out there were a lot of, on the back end, some lawsuits and different things going on because he had inappropriate kind of behavior, stalking female founders, things like that. Obviously someone I don't want to work with. So that kind of was like, okay, well, I need to end that conversation and not pursue that, even though it could have been an area for me to get money. Another one was in the term sheets. Investors wanted to put that I wasn't allowed to have children. They really, really were against that, but only for women. They stated that's only for the women founders. So, you have to kind of think about, well, do I want to accept these things or do I need to turn down that money? So I think there are definitely instances where it can be more challenging, to be honest, being a woman raising money. And it's good to know that going into it.
I just want to say that line in your term sheet is absolutely insane. And I can't believe that they put that in writing somewhere. That's ridiculous.
Okay, Janine, what do you think? How would you answer that question?
Can you remind me what the question was? I got distracted by that term sheet thing.
Special challenges for being.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I guess I had like to a much lesser degree, a more entertaining example in that we pitched to one VC group and this guy was like, I mean, why is Janine CEO? Shouldn't Rob be CEO? And I was like, okay, right. And then our investors were like, of course Janine is CEO, moving on. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. And so, like it involved interviewing quite a range of people because I really did not want funding from someone who's like, I don't think this lady should be CEO. That's a terrible idea, right? Versus the other group that's like, of course she should be CEO. Why are we even discussing this, right? So, I was fortunate that I had multiple options and people to talk to, but it comes down to the like it takes many months of getting ready for fundraising a lot of the time. So you have to like talk to lots of different people and find the right fit for you.
Yeah. Great. Well, we are at the hour. I just first of all, I want to thank the panel for a really interesting conversation and a lot to learn from you all. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you are interested in a possible female entrepreneurs support group, please fill out the questionnaire, and we'll get back to you if we decide to do it, depend on the interest. And for those of you who asked entrepreneurship questions, sorry, we couldn't get to them. They're good questions, but they didn't really relate specifically to the topic. I'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone wants to stay and chat. And if some of you people have the more general questions, happy to answer it then. But we'll let our very busy female founders disappear to dinner/work and go on from there. So thank you again, Janine, Katherine, and Ivana for joining us today. So cheers.
Bye, everyone. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Bye.